The one who was to be called one day the cherished child of the world was born in the little city of Alençon, northern France, on January 2, 1873. God, like a potter fashioned in clay, prepared her from the beginning for the mission he would one day entrust to her. He surrounded her with love. As the last child, her parents and four sisters adored her. If she was tired or sick, everyone hovered over her cradle. Obviously, the household revolved around the little one, Therese. But if God placed so much love near her, He also sent much love into her little heart, making it warm and affectionate. Her playmate was Celine, 4 years older than she. They amused themselves for long hours, especially with their pet hens. One day Louise, the house helper, found Therese in Celine's bed. "We are like the two hens. We're inseparable." Therese also had her shortcomings. When things did not go just right according to her way of thinking, she got into frightful tantrums. She also had a stubborn streak. When she said no, nothing could make her give in. But God had already taken hold of her. She loved Jesus very much and wanted to go to heaven to be with him. In an outburst of affection for her mother, she would kiss her and at the same time tell her, "Oh, how I wish you would die, Mama." When scolded, she answered, "It's because I want you to go to heaven." She would not miss her prayers for anything, and as she grew older, she gained more control over her character. God showed her that she had nothing to fear as long as she was with him. One night, she dreamt she was in the garden all alone. Suddenly, she stopped, seized with fright. In front of her, there was a barrel, and on this barrel two frightful little devils were dancing. All of a sudden, they cast fiery glances at her, and at the same moment appeared more frightened than she was. Not knowing what to do to hide from her gaze, they went to hide in the laundry, running like madmen each time they saw her. It was just a dream, but so vivid was it that she understood that a soul in a state of grace had nothing to fear from demons who were capable of fleeing before the gaze of a little child. This happy period of her life was to end soon. She had to pass through trials and sufferings to experience even more the unfathomable mercy of God. She was only 4 when she lost her mother. The Virib family moved to Lisieux, a nearby town, to be near their closest relatives. As for Therese, her whole character changed. The child who had been lively and playful, the joy of the family, now turned in upon herself. She became silent, timid, and oversensitive. If she happened to cause anyone she loved some little trouble, even unwittingly, she cried and then began to cry again for having cried. Nobody could console her. At home within the family, she could still be outgoing, but as soon as she was outside, sadness overwhelmed her. They sent her to the boarding school at the Benedictine Abbey. She could endure this only because of the presence of Celine, 4 years her senior, who took her part in all the usual little incidents of a boarding school life. But when Celine's studies were completed and she left, Therese never returned. She could not have stayed without her sister. Soon, A second blow befell her in the form of an emotional trauma. At the time of her mother's death, she had chosen Pauline, the second to the eldest, as her little mother. One day, when she was 9, Therese overheard that Pauline was soon to enter Carmel. She was now to lose her second mother. Pauline tried to console her, explaining to her the life of Carmel. In the bottom of her heart, Therese felt without the least doubt that God also wanted her to become a Carmelite sister, not to be with Pauline, but for Jesus alone.
She met Mother Marie de Gonzague, the prioress who believed in her vocation, and without knowing anything of the child's secret wish, she gave her the name of Therese of the Child Jesus. But Therese had to wait till she was 16. The nuns did not receive postulants at the age of 9. The sudden departure of Pauline plunged her in total anguish. There followed a strange sickness brought on by her emotional frustration. The doctors judged her state very serious. She appeared to be almost always delirious, saying things that had no meaning, often appeared to be in a faint, and still she was not deprived of her reason for one single instant. What anguish for her to see she had lost her self-control, and that her loved ones suffered so much because of her. As her illness reached a crisis and doctors feared for her life, her father, frightened, arranged a novena to Our Lady of Victories. Finding no help on earth, Therese also turned towards Mary and prayed to her with all her heart. All of a sudden, the statue of the Virgin on the mantelpiece smiled to her with ineffable tenderness. At that instant, all her pain disappeared and 2 large tears flowed down her cheeks silently. The Virgin had cured her. God wanted her heart for Himself and let her experience it at her first communion. Ah, how sweet was this encounter with Jesus! She felt that she was loved, and she said, "I love you and I give myself to you forever." Tears of joy soon flowed to the great consternation of her companions. "Why is she crying?" "It is because her mother is not here." They did not understand that all the joy of heaven had entered her heart. In this period, it was an unusual experience. God was not known as a God of love but of justice. Priests preach about hell, mortal sin, death, and God's wrath for the sinners. It was frightening and so different from her experience that Therese started to suffer from scruples, thinking she offended God in all her actions. What a martyr for her who loved Him so much! In such a wounded, fragile state, how could she hope to enter Carmel, one of the strictest religious orders in the church? God had to make a miracle. It happened on Christmas night, 1886. Although Therese was almost 14, the family still had this custom of putting her shoes near the fireplace. On returning from midnight mass, she heard her father, probably tired, say as he noticed her slippers, "Well, fortunately this will be the last year." Celine, who knew Therese well, said to herself, "Heavens, what a flood of tears this is going to start." But Therese was no more the same. She opened her gifts with joy in front of her bewildered sister and her laughing father. She had been completely transformed. She said she was flooded with a torrent of light. From that moment, she ceased to weep. She was once more in control. A few days later, she received another grace. An image jutted out of her missal, and she was struck by the sight of the drops of blood dripping from the hands of the crucified Lord. She resolved to remain always at the foot of Calvary in order to gather up all these drops of blood and pour them out upon sinners. Soon after, she read in the newspaper that the condemned murderer had refused to see a priest. Thinking of her resolution, she prayed and prayed for him so that he would be saved by Jesus' redemptive blood. She was certain that God would answer her prayer, but she asked, as a proof of the light she had received, that this murderer would show some sign of repentance. On the day after his execution, Therese eagerly opened the newspaper. There, she read that before placing his head upon the scaffold to be beheaded, the criminal Pranzini had grasped the crucifix held by the priest and kissed it 3 times. This was the confirmation of Therese's interior light, strengthening definitively her convictions. She had discovered the God of love. She had proof that God is love. God had shown His love for her by transforming her completely. And to this personal experience was added Francini's conversion, obtained through her prayer. She called him my first child.
Now she was ready in every aspect. Psychologically, she was no more a child. She had become a woman. She had found back her emotional balance. She had discovered her vocation in depth, to enter Carmel to pray for sinners. She decided she would enter at the age of 15 and took all the necessary steps to achieve this goal. She first confided her desire to her father, who cried out that God was giving him a great honor in asking his children from him. She soon had to face oppositions. She went to the priest who was the ecclesiastical superior of the Carmelite convent, but he would not hear of a 15-year-old child entering the monastery. While opposing her and giving his refusal, the priest added, "You may go to the bishop." Therese had the courage to do just this, and put up her hair for the occasion in a grown-up fashion, a feminine gesture, but also a sign of maturity. She spoke with the bishop, and as he remained hesitant, she declared, "I will go to the Pope," and it is what she did. With her father and Celine, she joined in a pilgrimage to Rome for the celebration of Pope Leo XIII's sacerdotal jubilee. The 2 young and pretty Martin sisters did not pass unnoticed, but Therese did not mind. She was there to fight for her vocation, to speak to the Pope. She still enjoyed herself tremendously, whether while admiring the Swiss mountains from the train, or visiting all those fascinating places and monuments so full of the presence of the first Christians. Then, the long-awaited papal audience arrived. Therese's heart was beating strongly as she took her place in the line of pilgrims who, each in turn, kissed the foot and the hand of Leo XIII and received his blessing. A moment later, she was at the Holy Father's feet. She joined her hands, and lifting tear-filled eyes to his face, she cried out, "Most Holy Father, in honor of your jubilee, permit me to enter Carmel at the age of 15. "Well, my child," the Holy Father replied, looking at her kindly, "do what the superiors tell you." But she said in a suppliant voice, "Oh, Holy Father, if you say yes, everybody will agree." The Pope answered, you will enter if God wills it." It was a great disappointment for Therese, but the final words of the Pope were a real prophecy. In spite of all the obstacles, God's will was accomplished. The bishop gave his consent a few months later. Therese could enter Carmel, despite her young age. That day, as she approached the enclosure door, her heart was beating so violently, it seemed impossible to walk. She knelt down before her father for his blessing, and he knelt himself and blessed her, tears flowing down his cheeks. Then the door of Carmel closed upon her, and there she was, receiving the welcoming embrace of the sisters. She discovered a harmony between her inner being and the cloistered life. She was happy with everything, the poverty, prayer, silence. Nevertheless, she did not experience any consolation. She was formed by the prioress Mother Marie de Gonzague, an intelligent, strong woman, but also very strict and marked by the spirituality of the time. As a matter of fact, Therese needed formation at this point. She had been something of a spoiled child in the family and had done practically no work. Her 4 sisters did not let her touch a thing. Her ineptitude at housework prompted Mother Marie de Gonzague's remark, "It is easy to see that our cloisters are swept by a child of 15. Therese was afraid of spiders, and so she avoided dark corners when cleaning. Eventually, however, she succeeded in overcoming herself in this matter at the cost of many a reprimand. The formation she received from the prioress was very firm.
A few months after, the time for the reception of the habit arrived. Her beautiful blonde hair was cut, and she put on the brown Carmelite habit with the white veil of the novices. From now on, she was Sister Therese of the child Jesus. She was Jesus' spouse forever. Therese loved snow very much and secretly wished that it would snow, but the weather was too mild for that. After the ceremony, stepping outside the chapel, she saw the cloister, white with snow. It was Jesus' gift for this beautiful day. What mortal bridegroom, no matter how powerful, could make snow fall from heaven to charm his beloved? Therese's formation went on. She felt isolated. She had nobody to talk to. The prioress scolded her when she went to see her. Therese did not converse with Marie and Pauline, her 2 elder sisters already in Carmel, because the rule forbade it. At prayer, she knew aridity. "Jesus says nothing to me," she wrote. She neither experienced feelings nor could think of something to say to him, and often slept because she lacked sleep. Her prayer was very simple. She only remained before God, fixing her gaze on Him. It was precisely this that made her a great contemplative. Then it was that she discovered Saint John of the Cross, the Spanish Carmelite reformer of the 16th century. It was a great light and help for her, because of the contrast between her discovery of the God of love and what she saw around her. The sisters who discovered the God of justice and made a lot of sacrifices and penances to acquire merits. On the contrary, Saint John of the Cross confirmed her intuitions about the infinite love of God. Therese lived by his teaching. She memorized pages of the saints' writings. John of the Cross also gave her counsels about growth in charity. Therese showed extraordinary thoughtfulness in her love for her sisters. For example, there was an old sister, Sister Saint Peter, who had difficulty to walk. It cost Therese very much to help her go to the refectory at the end of silent prayer, because she knew she was not easy to please. But she remembered the words of Jesus, "Whatever you do to the least of my brothers, you do to me." The poor invalid grumbled all the way. She was never satisfied despite all the efforts of Therese to make her feel comfortable. And before leaving her, Therese never forgot to give her her most beautiful smile. Still, those who lived with her did not understand Therese, and she was wondering if her ideas about God were right. 91, a Franciscan Recollect father preached the community retreat. She went to confess to him, and he understood her perfectly. What a liberation for Therese! Instead of telling her that her ideas about God and her desire to love Him to the point of folly were too high for her, this priest encouraged her to follow the way she had discovered. He launched her full sail upon the waves of confidence and love, which strongly attracted her, but upon which she dared not advance. What was this way of confidence and love? Therese had discovered the mercy of God. Since God is a merciful Father, since He needs to love us, Therese's discovery was that she should always be a child before Him. She said, "I know God. He is a Father who, in order to be happy, must have His child resting on His heart. And so I shall take care not to present any merits of mine, but only those of our Lord. As for me, I shall have nothing. I do not want to present anything. I prefer to let God love me as much as He wants. It is because of this I shall get such a good reception." Here we have the heart of her teaching. A little time later, Pauline, now Mother Agnes, was elected as the prioress and asked Therese to assist in the formation of novices. Therese found an opportunity here to explain her teaching. Obliged by her function to speak to her sisters, she told them what she felt and experienced. She explained a little of her doctrine, which was in contrast to her surroundings and the sermons she had to listen to. Even in Carmel, the love of God was not known. People kept score with God, but God wants to give Himself beyond all demands and rights. Therese said to herself, "God has so much love to give, and He can't do it. People present only their own merits, then these are so paltry." She therefore presented herself before God, saying, "Give me this love. I accept to be a victim of love. That is, to receive all the love which others do not receive because they will not let you love them as you wish." Such was her confidence in the mercy which exceeds justice. She wanted to delight God, to give Him joy, to let Him love. She then made her offering to God as merciful love. Therese wanted to lead the novices she was in charge of in the way of absolute confidence. Sometimes, when discouraged, they asked her, "What can God do with me? I am such a poor material." Saint Therese said just the opposite. "How fortunate you are to be poor. That is why you will receive much." This littleness and poverty was of course joined to effort. Therese took the image of a toddler trying to go up the stairs. He cannot go up. His foot fails to reach the next step. but he never stops calling out to God, "Papa." After a while she said, "God will come down, take him up in his arms, and carry him to the top." A minor incident in her life illustrates this. One of the novices, seeing her great patience, said to herself, "This patience gets on my nerves." One day the novice provoked Therese for an entire morning, but never succeeded in making her lose patience. At the end, she threw herself at Therese's feet. "How did you ever become so patient?" she answered. "At first, I was like you. But one fine day, God picked me up and put me there." This was her whole teaching, desiring perfection. She simply awaited this gesture of God, and He picked her up and set her there. Does that mean that Therese refrained from any effort? Of course not. At the bottom of the stairs, the child still has to lift his little foot. Therese followed for a time all the customary penances practiced in the monastery, but it made her sick, and she understood that God was not asking that of her. Her efforts took the form of carrying out her ordinary duties with a great love. She put love in whatever her duty happened to be: shaking the blankets, sweeping the stairs, taking care of the novices. It was why she was not noticed. It was so simple. She carried out her duties with perfection, conscientiously, in the sight of God. This was her asceticism. Therese had another opportunity to express her little way of confidence and love when Mother Agnes asked her to write down her childhood memories. For her, it was not an autobiography, but a song to the mercies of the Lord. She thought it was for her sister alone that she was writing. Never would she have guessed that one day these two school copybooks would be known all over the world and change the lives of so many people. On Holy Thursday night, 1896, she was 23. She had scarcely been in bed when she felt something like a bubbling stream mounting to her lips. It was blood that she had coughed up, sign that she was already in advanced age of tuberculosis. This disease could not be cured at the time, so she understood she had only a few months left to live. The thought of going to heaven soon flooded her with joy.
But a few days later, suddenly, this joy disappeared. Horrible inner voices suggested to her that all her great desires, the little way, heaven, had been illusions. There was only one obvious fact. She was going to die, young, for nothing. She then prayed to the saints, but they no longer answered her. She wrote the creed in her blood, but the temptations against faith persisted. She understood God was asking her to share in the drama of Calvary, to give her life for sinners with the suffering Jesus, so that God would open heaven for all eternity to them. One day, a sister saw her walking with difficulty in the garden when she was already very sick. "Sister Therese, you are too tired for that." "I am walking for a missionary," Therese answered. Her desire to make God loved had no limits. The day after her death, her temptations against faith were so violent that she became agitated and begged the nurse to sprinkle her with holy water. She was close to despair. Nevertheless, Therese had forewarned her sisters. Do not be surprised. I have asked to die the death of Jesus on the cross when he said, 'Father, why have you abandoned me?' She suffered in this manner right up to the end. God permitted the action of the devil at that moment in order that her act of love might be more perfect, more powerful. With a look of love, she uttered her last words, 'My God, I love you,' and died. Her face became beautiful. It was beaming with life and happiness as if she was not dead. She was smiling. She was buried 4 days later in the little cemetery of Lisieux. None of the few sad people following the coffin could imagine that soon this 24-year-old Carmelite nun would become the glory and the pride of their town. Even her sisters in Carmel, although used to detecting sanctity in people, were unable to discover Therese's greatness. She was so simple. One said, "This little sister, charming as she is, has certainly never done anything worth the telling." All of them could never have been farther from the truth. Mother Agnes decided to publish her sister's memories, and 2,000 books were printed. She sent copies to all the French Carmels and her families and friends. The result was amazing. Letters of thanksgiving for conversions and favors granted by Therese began to arrive at the Lisieux Carmel. Everyone was asking for relics. The book needed ceaseless reprinting and was translated in several languages. Why? What do we find in the story of a soul? Scarcely anything, if we only see in it the trivial anecdotes of a nun, the petty incidents of community life. But her writing is filled with the divine. She opens a new way with her discovery of the God of mercy. Only 16 years after her death, Pope Pius X said that she was the greatest saint of modern times. Had she lived, she would have been 50 when beatified and 52 when canonized. In 1997, she was declared Doctor of the Church by Pope John Paul II. Her message is revolutionary. She reveals to us that the highest sanctity can be found in a very ordinary life, in any setting and in all situations. Now, more than 1 century after her death, her relics travel all over the world, attracting thousands of people, leaving a trail of light and love. To our sophisticated and jaded civilization, which has lost the sense of the infinite and suffers from this, God has sent a child who, with the charm and purity of her simplicity, brings us once more the eternal message of His love, namely, that His love is all the more eager in face of our betrayals, and that He waits for us to love Him and to let ourselves be loved by Him like very small children. I feel specially that my mission is about to begin. My mission of making God loved as I love Him, of giving my little way to souls. It is the way of spiritual childhood. It is the way of confidence and total abandon. I want to teach them the little means that have succeeded so perfectly with me. To tell them that there is only one thing to do here on earth: to cast at Jesus the flowers of little sacrifices, to take Him by caresses. This is the way I have taken Him, and it's for this that I shall be so well received.